Chapter 3. There was a long silver car waiting in the street. Charlie looked at it and sneered to himself. When his parents were young, everybody had cars. Nobody had ever thought they'd have to be banned, even though they knew they were dirty and that the oil that makes the petrol that makes them move would run out sooner or later. Sooner, as it turned out. Ever since the great asthma epidemic of 15 years before, when so many children fell to wheezing and creaking and coughing all at once that the schools had to close, and the government finally realised it had to act about car pollution, cars had been banned in the housing areas. The Empire, which loved cars, had tried and tried to convince everyone that cars and asthma had nothing to do with each other. They said cats were to blame, and certainly more and more people seemed to be allergic to cats as well. But for once the government had stood up to them and said, in effect, you can poison your own children, but you can't make us poison ours. So now most people used electros, little scooters and vans that ran on the electricity from the sun or the wind farms. There was very little oil left. Planes couldn't fly at all because there was no fuel for them, and very few people had cars with petrol engines. Even fewer had permission to use them in the housing areas. Usually it was only government people or really rich people, empire people mainly. But this car was beautiful, long and low like a shark, and inside it smelt so sleek and leathery, not rough leather like Charlie was used to, but smooth and expensive. It was peculiar, tempting but sickening at the same time. Charlie knew it was these things that made him sometimes unable to breathe, that made his chest so tight and his shoulders high so he would cough and cough to try and get some air into his lungs and oxygen into his blood. But sitting inside one, as Rafi pulled out and the car sped off down the road, he was amazed and delighted by it. So fast, so smooth, so powerful. It would be fantastic to drive one of these. Troy, in the back of the car with Charlie, slobbered on him. "How come you've got a car, Rafi?" Charlie asked. "Did someone a favour," said Rafi. "He lets me use it." Up on the main road, the low lights cast their orange pools on the dust as the car slid through town. Charlie stared out of the window. He felt very separate. Rafi drove to a housing tower, a mile or so from home. The flat was on the 10th floor and had no curtains. "Sorry, it's not very homey," said Rafi. He looked amused. It was cold and empty, with old blue tack marks on the walls where there might have been posters once upon a time. There were 2 small bedrooms with 2 small beds, a sitting room that they didn't go into, and a small kitchen with nothing in the fridge or on the side. There was no sign of Martha, and it was quite clear that nobody lived here. "Your tea," Rafi gestured to some damp fish fingers sitting on a plate. They'd obviously been there for hours. Charlie was only interested in the locks, the doors, the windows. "My room, your room," said Rafi, waving a hand lazily. "Mum will be along later." Charlie knew perfectly well that this was not Martha and Rafi's home. He wondered exactly how stupid Rafi thought he was. He could see that a guy like Rafi wouldn't rate him, but really? Did he think he was a baby? But then, if Rafi didn't think he was clever enough to escape, he might not bother locking up very thoroughly. "Great," said Charlie with a smile. He tried to look a little confused and very accepting all at once. In his mind, his plan was already falling into place. He would pretend to go to bed when sent. He would escape when all was quiet. He'd have a head start and not be missed until the morning. "I can't believe I let this happen," Magdalen was muttering. "I can't believe I was so dumb." Aneba looked at her irritably. "No," he said, "it's not your fault." "I should have known," muttered Magdalen. "No," said Aneba. "Yes," said Magdalen, "I was stupid." "No," said Aneba again. They were sitting side by side on a metal bunk in a cramped cabin, more of a storeroom really. It was small and smelt of wet metal and salt. The furniture, 2 skinny bunks, a tiny metal table, a tiny metal sink, and a metal loo with no seat, was all built in. There were no windows. The door was locked. There was no way out. One whole wall, that makes it sound really big, but it wasn't because the cabin was so tiny, was made up of a brownish mirror. In the slightly more comfortable cabin next door, on the other side of the mirrored wall, 2 men, one big and fat, the other skinny and snivelly looking, were staring at it. Or rather, they were staring through it at Aneba and Magdalen, for from this side the mirror was a dark-looking window. I thought they were, meant to be, really clever, said the big fat one. Yeah, said the skinny snivelly one. So how come she's saying she's stupid, said the big fat one. Yeah, said the skinny snivelly one. The big fat one was called Winner. The skinny snivelly one was called Sid. They stared a little longer. If I'm not stupid, Magdalen was saying, then how come I went with that slimy yob Rafi Sattler in his horrible car? Because he said Charlie was hurt, said Aneba. Anyone would have done that. Well, how come I drank his drugged drink, said Magdalen. In the old days, the first thing a girl learned was not to get in a car with someone you don't know. The first thing, stupid. And the second one was not to accept drinks from strangers. Yes, but we know Rafi, Aneba replied. What kind of parent wouldn't go in a car with someone they know who says their child has been knocked down? Who wouldn't accept a drink from him? Stop it. Stop blaming yourself. Also, you may remember I fell for just the same trick with Martha, so you're calling me stupid too. Well, said Magdalen, all right. What I really can't believe is how we were tricked by such stupid people. Winner and Sid glanced at each other. Did she just say Mr. Rafi is stupid? Said Winner. Yeah, said Sid. A curious gurgly noise came out of Winner's throat. It sounded a little bit like he was choking, but then when he opened his mouth it became apparent this was actually a laugh. Sid snickered. Then Winner stopped laughing and his jaw fell open a bit to one side. Did she just say, we're stupid? He said. Skinny Snivelly Sid stopped snickering to think. It was quite hard work for him thinking. You could tell that by the look on his face, as if he badly needed to go to the loo. Yeah, he said at last. Winner screwed up his face and said a rude word. He didn't like being called stupid at all. Sid was used to it, though, mostly from Winner, usually. Yeah, well, we're here now, said Aneba. And yes, we weren't careful enough. We'll just have to be a bit cleverer from now on. Not much chance for cleverness when we're locked in here, being taken Lord knows where, said Magdalen. You know what I mean, said Aneba. Yeah, said Magdalen. They were both thinking the same thing, although neither of them said it. Charlie, where was he? What was he going to do without them? They were going to have to be clever to get back to him in one piece as soon as possible. Aneba squeezed Magdalen's hand. Sweet, sneered Winner on the other side of the two-way mirror. Yeah, said Sid. Courage, whispered Aneba. Oh, all right, said Magdalen. Let me just dip into the handy bag of it that I take with me everywhere. She was cranky because she was scared. Come on, whispered Aneba. Sorry, she whispered. I'm just... Me too, said Aneba. Aneba, she said, why would Martha and Rafi do this? And who are these guys? What's all this about? I'm going through in my head what it's not, he said. I haven't got to what it is yet, or why. I just don't know, she whispered. She was a scientist. She was used to knowing things, discovering them, recognising them. She was almost as annoyed about being caught out as she was angry at having been stolen away. It can only be because of, I suppose, but why? Why now? And who? I think this is a submarine, said Aneba suddenly. What? Cried Magdalen. They looked at each other. So much for escaping. Aneba was hitting his fists gently against each other. He looked up. And, he said, and he went and peered closely at the brown glass wall. He stepped back again, and then, suddenly, he stuck his tongue out. A muffled expostulation came from the other side. Magdalen gasped. Really? She said, her eyebrows flying up her forehead. She went round behind him and made rude waggly donkey ear gestures behind his head. They giggled. It didn't really help, though. Not in a practical way.